Today I'm speaking to Debby Englander. Debby is a writing coach and an editor. She's worked for a large New York publisher. So thank you very much for agreeing to speak to me today.
Oh, my pleasure. Nice to speak with you.
Can you tell us a bit more about yourself, please?
Sure. I've spent most of my career in and around book publishing. I actually started off in selling subsidiary rights. So that's selling a hardcover to a paperback house or a magazine excerpt. I actually switched over and worked as a reporter at Money Magazine for a long time, and then ran the Fortune Book Club, and then switched again to become a business book editor. And I ran a business book program at Wiley for a long time. For the past couple of years, I've actually been still editing some books, but really working as an author coach. And that's everything from helping people edit their books to advising them, should they self-publish or should they try to find a literary agent or a publisher. And what's nice is kind of my background, having done different things and understanding the writing process, I think really allows me to help authors, which is both fun, but also publishing business is different than it was when I first started, literally changing by the day and kind of complicated. So one of my clients once described me as sort of a shepherd. So I'm there to guide authors through the ever-changing publishing world. And what I think is encouraging these days is there really are a lot of options to getting your book published. Years ago, it was either get a publisher to say yes, or you kind of stuck your manuscript back in the drawer, or there were some really kind of unsavory vanity houses where you paid to have your book published. These days, there are many more options. So there are the traditional publishers. The largest ones generally require you to have a literary agent submit your book. Then there are some hybrid publishers, and these are, in some cases, very reputable, and your book looks as if it came from a traditional publisher, but you are in some way financing, either purchasing books or paying for some of the services. And then there's self-publishing, which is also known as independent publishing. And the big mistake people think is self-publishing means DIY. And that's not the case at all. When you self-publish, you want your book to look as if it came from a traditional publisher. And that means either you assemble a team of the experts and you're kind of project managing the team, or you can use some of the services, some companies that will take care of everything for a flat fee. The main thing is when you self-publish, your book has to be really professional. And the easy reason is when you're selling your book on Amazon, it's too simple for someone to comment and criticize the littlest thing from, oh, I couldn't even read the title off of the jacket, or I really love this book, but there were so many typos. And that's why you really have to, in my mind, it pays to work with a team.
Yeah, and you have to be prepared to accept feedback, because it can feel, I mean, I've written books in the past and it can feel very much like your baby, and you actually don't want to, I can criticize my baby, but nobody else can. But actually you have to get past that, don't you? And
absolutely. So one of the first things I tell authors is it's their book. I mean, if I'm working with them as an editor, I want to be really helpful. So I'd like to think that my editing advice or any criticism I've had is meant to be taken in a constructive vein. And you don't have to take all the advice. In other words, if you feel really strongly, you've written a memoir, and someone is suggesting that, hey, that's got to be cut down, or certain scenes can be left out, then it's a conversation with the editor. In other words, sometimes I may underestimate the importance of a particular scene, and if the author says, hey, I really need it here because, and they make a compelling case, I may say, you know what, terrific. And if I really have to look for another section to cut down because the manuscript is too long, then we'll do that. But yes, authors need to develop a thick skin. And one of the things that authors understand, they need to get feedback. So they might have what's called first readers or beta readers. And these can be friends and family or other people in a writer's group. But really what you want is objective people, objective readers. So your family and friends probably will be reluctant to criticize you. Yes. So they're the best people to go to. But you want people to be honest. You're so close to the subject of the book that you really can't tell whether a scene is needed or it's clear to someone who doesn't understand the subject matter. So when you ask people for feedback, you've got to be ready for some criticism. I mean, feedback is not helpful if it's all positive and comments like, we really love your book, it's great, it's wonderful. Then there's no point to asking people for feedback. But what's helpful is limiting the number of people. So I usually suggest if you've got 4 or 5 first readers, and maybe they're only reading half the book, let's say 6 chapters, try to ask them specific questions, because then it's easier for them to respond. So for example, if you've written a novel, you can say, do you feel the characters have been developed enough? Do you have a sense of the character's motivation? Or you can ask, is the plot moving along at an appropriate place? Do you find the plot developments believable? And then you'll get specific feedback. You'll also get feedback from everyone. So if 4 people had the same comment, maybe that one character is really underdeveloped, well, that's a pretty good number of people giving you the same feedback. So you'd want to incorporate that. But asking specific questions means you're more likely to get feedback that you can actually incorporate into the book, as opposed to just, I really like this book or I hated this book. And you can do the same thing if you've written some sort of a nonfiction self-help book. You can say, did you buy my suggestions? Would you follow the advice in this book? Did you feel that it was understandable for a wide audience? Or was it written in too technical a fashion? Probably one of the most common mistakes is that people are so focused on conveying the content. So maybe you're writing about a business topic or a medical topic that you're expert in. You're focused on, okay, here's everything I've got to spill out, all my expertise, so to speak, and then it becomes full of jargon or written in a more academic setting. So the easy way, 2 things. One, always try to imagine that you're speaking to one reader, as if you're having a conversation. So you'd even say, you might be doing this. So you're addressing the reader rather than saying, we believe, or people generally do this. That just makes it seem more academic and kind of as if it's written from, way up there, and you're not having a conversation. And the other thing, particularly if you're a newbie author, try and read your material aloud. It's almost as if when you're writing and then rereading something on print, that's not the same as when you're hearing it. So I've had authors, sometimes they're recording, they think the book is done. They may be recording the audio version of the book. And as they're reading it, they're saying, oh, this isn't clear, or I would never have used this word. So they're kind of editing themselves at the 11th hour, but it's because of what we hear. So a good exercise is just reread your book aloud and see if you can make changes. And you can do that before or after you send it out for feedback.
Yeah, I mean, when I was writing books, that's one of the things I found, that I'd think, oh, this reads perfectly. And then I'd read it out aloud and I'd go, oh, no, it doesn't at all. It's completely, it's not expressed well, because it was difficult to read. And if it was difficult to read out loud, then people were going to find it difficult to understand quickly. So, yeah, I mean, I think that's great advice.
writing and speaking are different skills.
Yeah.
And sometimes I have somebody who is able to describe the topic of the book and is really enthusiastic. And I'm like, great, will you send me some material? And then when I see the material is flat and not as exciting as the person sounded. So then it's my job to ask some questions and try and liven up the material. But somebody may say, I've never written, but I know that I've got a book in me. And then my suggestion is to try to talk the book through. So literally record, have the recordings transcribed, and then you can work with an editor to kind of assemble that into a book. But if you feel you're much more comfortable as a speaker than a writer per se, then speaking the book into existence may be a better option.
Oh, that's interesting. Yes, it never occurred to me you could do that, but I can see how well that would work for some people. And there's lots of services now that you can get. You don't have to then transcribe it yourself. You can employ somebody else to do it.
Correct. It's relatively inexpensive to get it transcribed, and then the author him or herself may be able to kind of work with that as the book, or you can then work with, an editor. I mean, so many books, even if there's one name on the jacket as author, it really does take a village to produce a book. So many best-selling authors have worked with somebody, more than just an editor, actually sort of a collaborator to work on the book. And if you want to bring your book to life and find readers, there's nothing wrong with doing it. In other words, some people will work with a collaborator because they're busy doing other things. Sometimes it's just that you need someone else to kind of help you bring your words to life. And so it may be some combination of sort of helping you to write, helping you to do research, a combination of sort of writing and editing, and that's fine. And these days, it's actually relatively easy to find people to help you, and it doesn't cost wild sums of money.
What would you say to somebody who said, I want my book published by a traditional publishing house? It's a great book. It deserves to be published by a traditional publishing house. I'm not going to self-publish. It has to be done by a traditional publishing house. Do you think that's unrealistic for most people?
For many people, it's unrealistic only because the bar these days to getting accepted by a traditional publisher is so high. So yes, you need strong content, but even more importantly than the subject matter of the book is the author's platform. And that's not just the expertise, that someone spent 20 years running a company or was a physician. It means, what are you bringing to the publisher that will help the publisher sell your book? And these days, are you speaking? And again, whether it's virtually or in person, how active are you on social media? So do you have followers? Are you posting? Do you have an email list of people who might be interested in buying the book? Do you belong to any professional groups that would help promote the book, featuring it on their website or doing some sort of a mailing to attract people to it? So publishers will say, yes, we can, we'll produce your book. It will look terrific. We will have a publicist in-house work with you. The book will be available online and in some bookstores. And then it's kind of this unspoken, but what are you doing? In other words, how will you drive readers to the bookstores or to Amazon to buy your book? So if an author has no platform, in other words, for example, if it's a memoir, and it's maybe a terrific story, but the author is not on social media, then yes, it will be very hard to get a traditional publisher. If the author is a business person who's done some speaking in the past and is willing to spend a little time up front to ramp up his or her social media, then I would say spend a little time building up your platform before you try to approach a literary agent. But you need a proposal, and there's sort of a template. In other words, all proposals have the same elements. But if you have nothing on your platform other than this is what I've done before writing the book, it will be very hard to find a traditional publisher.
But and even so, you find a literary agent. So how would you go about finding a literary agent?
Well, one of the things I do, I will often work with authors and work with them on a proposal, and then I will try to find a literary agent. But they actually, if you can do the old-fashioned Google search, literary agents specializing in health books or whatever the topic of your book is. And there are many listings of literary agents. There are books that list literary agents. You then, let's say you find someone, go to the website, and the website is usually full of advice of, we will accept proposals. We first want a query letter. If we respond to the query letter, then we want you to send a proposal via an attachment. And agents are very clear on how they like materials submitted, and authors should follow the instructions, because it's tough enough to get a literary agent, and you do want to follow the rules. It seems silly, but the agents can be deluged. So if they say they don't want attachments, don't send them an attachment. But another strategy that I think authors can use is, if you've got a favorite book, or if you've read a book in the same genre as your book, look at the acknowledgments. Most authors will acknowledge their editor, their family, and their literary agent. So if there's a literary agent mentioned in a particular book, go to the agent's website. If the agent says, I am open to queries, then you kind of have the first line of your query letter of, I'm contacting you because I just read XYZ book, or one of my favorite books is such and such, and I think you'd be interested in my book because. It doesn't always work, but agents have said, hey, it's nice that somebody read the acknowledgments, that someone. And so that's another try. If you're in a writer's group, or even on social media, start following some literary agents and kind of engage with them. And there are literary agents on Twitter who will often say, hey, I'm now open to queries and submissions. So that's another way. And it also will give you a little sense of what the agent looks for, because the agents will post about books that they've sold or new clients they've signed up. If somebody's in a writer's group, ask some of the other writers, do you have a literary agent?
Fantastic advice, really, really good. But obviously, some people, because of the nature of the book, they're never going to get it published traditionally. So then they're looking at either the hybrid route or the self-publishing route. And I mean, I think you're not at all scathing about that, are you? That it's not actually.
No, it isn't. It isn't, because to me it's an option. If years ago you were kind of stuck and you couldn't publish at all. So my feeling is, if you're very clear about what you want to get out of publishing your book. So if it's a memoir and you really want it published, whether it's for a small group of friends or family, then self-publish it. But self-publish it and make sure it's as professional as you can. And so that does mean using a professional cover designer, having the book edited, having it copy edited and proofread. It means writing very crisp copy so that when someone comes to Amazon, you've got a great story. You've written really good descriptive copy. And you can do this yourself, or you can find people to do this. And again, many services are out there. Some people self-publish and just use Amazon, which makes it relatively easy. For me, the downside to that is that everything is done via email. So I like to talk to somebody, and so if you run into a problem with, let's say the cover is not loading on Amazon, you have to wait to get a response to figure out what the problem is. There are other services like BookBaby, and you can just go online. It's bookbaby.com. I have no relationship with them, but what's great is you can pick and choose the services you need. So say you've already had experience writing or you've had it edited by someone already, then you don't have to pay for the book edited. You can pay to have it copy edited or proofread, or just have the cover design. So you can kind of, pick from column A, column B, and use the services you want. The great news about when you self-publish, you're usually doing print on demand. So you're not paying for hundreds or thousands of books. You can pay for 50 books at a time, and then market your book, launch your book, and then order a reprint. So the economies are really very affordable. Now, hybrid publishing, I think, is great for someone who has a huge platform or needs to have the book. So if somebody is out speaking to large groups, say you're a keynote speaker, or you work for a large organization and you're constantly out speaking, then you can do a hybrid, because maybe you need to have 1,000 books every 6 months. And the hybrid publisher loves authors who are purchasing books, because it obviously helps them in terms of the printing. And again, that's, you've got all the services of traditional publisher. Your book will be at Amazon and maybe some other bookstores, but your primary reason for choosing a hybrid is you need to have a large number of books at a time. And that's not for everybody, but that is a good option for professional speakers or folks who have a very sizable mailing list. Maybe they've got thousands of clients and they want to mail everybody a book as a holiday gift.
Yeah, and in that case, they're not actually trying, as you say, it's a gift rather than trying to sell it. I mean, for some of those people. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
The main thing, and this sounds obvious, but whatever service you're doing, and even if people were, I do this when I'm going to hire somebody or investigate something, Google the name of a company or a person's name plus complaints. Because what will come up is there are some kind of unsavory services. Once somebody is active as an author, you're online, you're asking questions. And so somehow through the great internet, you'll be solicited by a lot of individuals and companies. And by doing that quick check, you will be able to see whether there have been, official complaints, or whether authors will say, hey, wait a second, this really isn't a full service publisher, it's more like a printer. So while they may be promising you all these things and asking you for upfront money, you're not going to get it. I mean, and it's unfortunate that there are some unsavory companies out there, but I've had authors come to me and say, hey, just got this I've signed this contract, I'm moving ahead, and they send me the contract, or they give me the name of the company, and I realize that they think this is a traditional publisher, when in fact it's not. It literally is just going to print the books. So as eager as you are when someone expresses interest in your project, do a little due diligence before you sign on. Obviously, you spent time and effort on the book, and you want it to see the light of day, but you also want to be dealing with reputable companies. And, likewise, when people come to me, sometimes they'll ask me if they can speak to other authors that I've worked with, or can I point to books on Amazon that I've worked on? And I'm happy to do that. And so anyone you're dealing with, particularly if it's an individual you're hiring, a cover designer, ask to, if they don't have a fully developed website, ask to see covers of books that they've worked on. If it's an editor, ask if you can talk to other clients. And even with literary agents, an agent may say, great, I'm interested. You can always ask the literary agent if you can have, email addresses for 2 of their clients, and ask the clients, how has your experience been with a literary agent? Or tell me some of the pros and cons. And if someone is not willing to let you check references, to me, that's a little bit of a red flag.
Yeah. Yeah. I was actually looking at a very small publisher and wondering about approaching them some time ago. And what I ended up doing was I looked at, they had a very limited number of books, and that was okay because it was a new publisher. So it wasn't a problem from that point of view. But I ordered one of the books because I thought, let's have a look at the quality of the book.
Mm-hmm.
And the book came and it was really, really poor quality, on really thin paper.
I was going to say, did it fall apart when you opened it
Well,
up?
it didn't actually fall apart, but the quality, and I looked at it and thought, I wouldn't want to promote, if this was my book, I wouldn't want to promote it because I'd be embarrassed about the quality. The paper was so thin that when you were reading it, the print from the other side was showing through, and
it's terrible.
It was just terrible. And it was like, okay,
no. And you wouldn't have known that if you hadn't ordered the book. So,
yes.
People have to, again, not rush to publish. Once I went to a publicity event, and an author very proudly handed me his book, which he said he just published. And the front was fine, title, and I turned it over, and there was nothing. I mean, the back cover was completely blank. And I said, oh, and I had to be careful because clearly he had printed them. And I said, well, where's your barcode and price and the ISBN, which is what you need to publish a book? And he didn't know what I was asking. And then I said, and also, don't you want some copy on the back? So, your bio or some descriptive copy of the book. And his answer was, oh, but, on Amazon, you see the front of the book. So that's all I thought I needed. And, then I kind of walked him through. Fortunately, he hadn't printed thousands of books, but he literally had sort of tried to figure it out himself and just looked on Amazon and thought, well, I don't need a back cover. So that to me was sort of a rookie mistake because he hadn't bothered to talk to anybody.
Yeah.
And there's no reason for that. I mean, on Facebook, there are writers groups. On LinkedIn, there are self-published writers groups. There are so many places where you can, even if you're just reading conversations, you're learning about the process of publishing your book. And so I encourage everybody to do that because it will save them a lot of aggravation and missteps down the road.
That's fantastic advice.
Oh, good.
So if somebody's got a book in them and they want to write it, I think you would say, do it, write it, do your research, get other people to help you maybe, and look at the options of going down the traditional route. But for a lot of books, a more viable option is actually self-publishing, I think.
Absolutely, that would be good. And I would tell people to be patient. Even when you've got a manuscript that's pretty far along, you need to allow some time, to get the cover designed, to get it proofread, and also to plan a launch. So even if you're self-publishing, you can literally upload your manuscript and it could be ready in a matter of days, but you need to think about, okay, how will I promote it? How will I start to get people to post reviews on Amazon when it's available? So you don't necessarily want to pull the trigger and publish, 2 weeks after you finish the manuscript. You need to plan. And if you're working with a hybrid or a traditional publisher, the timeline is even longer. So you could sign your contract and it may be a year or longer before your book is published. And so you just have to understand that publishing is a marathon, not a sprint.
I guess that's life too, isn't it? It's a marathon, not a sprint.
Well, and if you know that, then you'll have far fewer disappointments, on the road to publication.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things I've found from the books I've published is that and written is that often people you expect to buy the book don't. I think it's important that anybody who's writing their first book doesn't assume that all their relatives, all their friends will want to buy the book, because that may not happen.
That's true. And in fact, you can actually track your sales on Amazon if you've self-published. So often people will say, oh, like, how could Amazon must be missing orders. There's only 5 orders, but I had, 10 people tell me they ordered the book. And I'm like, oh, well, I don't think you should believe them. Somebody told me that the average self-published book sells between 100 and 200 copies. And while I think that I don't know if that's 100% accurate, but that does seem reasonable. And I know for some people that seems really low. But that's actually, I think people should have a realistic expectation. Now, for a traditional publisher, they need to sell thousands. In fact, if you want a hardcover book, you have to print at least 1,500 copies, or the economies just don't work at all. And so even selling 1,500 copies over 6 months to a year, that can be challenging. I've worked with a few authors whose books have come out over the last year or so, and granted, this is pandemic, unprecedented times, but when I've reported back on weekly sales of 10 copies, 7 copies, I often have authors ask if I've left off a couple of zeros,
Yes.
that they just can't believe that, you know, in the whole country, only 7 people bought their book. And I say, yes, you know, I'm sorry. What's a little deceptive is when you look on Amazon and you can say, oh, in this category, I was, you know, 1,000, or my ranking increased so much for a period of time. But it doesn't mean you've sold thousands of books. It's all relative to what other books are selling in that category. So your ranking may have improved, but that could be a handful of copies. So the main thing is have realistic expectations. I mean, try to publish the best, the most professional book you can, but it will be rare that you know, there'll be another best-selling book. And I, you know, I love working with authors, but I will sometimes say, look at the bestseller list. The same books have been on there for 1-3 years, both in fiction and nonfiction. So when you publish, you're competing with all these very well-established brand names. And it's just going to be tough to knock them off the bestseller list.
Yeah. I mean, I talk to people who go, oh, I'm going to write a cookery book and, you know, it will be a bestseller. And the chances of that happening, I think, are very small, because, you know, there are well-known people. I mean, in this country, you know, this, and I'm sure it's the same in the US, there are certain cookery writers that
Sure,
their books are always bestsellers. And if I'm writing a cookery book, maybe it's better, in my opinion and my family's opinion, than the cookery book of this well-known person. But it's very unlikely that I will sell as many as this well-known person who's been in the bestseller list numerous times.
right. But it's also, you know, have realistic expectations. So most authors will say, can I, you know, have a review in, you know, the most prominent newspaper, or can I get on, you know, evening news or a morning talk show? And I'll say, well, how about starting off in your own community? I mean, getting an interview in even, you know, kind of a giveaway newspaper, a weekly newspaper, well, that's read by a whole lot of people. And if you get those people buying your book, or that newspaper could be read by folks who write for other publications or appear on other programs. So, you know, start off realistically, but also start off local. If you can get on a local radio show or an interview with a local newspaper and get some coverage of your book, then you can then try to go to a larger market, you know, another newspaper, you know, another TV show, and you've got either, you know, a video of your interview with the local station, or you have some local coverage. And that's the way you would start to build and get to larger audiences. And also online, there are so many publications that target particular topics. I would, you know, so again, a Google search for whatever the topic of your book is, and you want to look for both online publications, but also kind of bloggers who are writing on that topic. And you should approach the bloggers even before your book is out, because you want to start contributing to the community. So for example, let's say your book is about a particular parenting topic. Go to some of the parenting blogs and offer to contribute a column. And most bloggers are glad to have someone else write some of the content because they're so busy. And you're not mentioning the book, you're contributing as an expert on the topic. do this a couple of times. And then when your book is out, because you're already known in this community, then you could ask the person who runs the blog, hey, I've got a new book out. Maybe you want to do a Q&A with me, or would you like to run an excerpt from the book? And then the title of the book gets mentioned. Maybe they'll even link to an online bookseller. But what you've done with this strategy is you're already a contributing member of this community. You're already seen as an expert versus your book comes out and you approach media or bloggers and just say, hey, my book is out, don't you want to give it some coverage? Well, then you're just an author asking for coverage versus already having a relationship in this community. So that's one of the reasons why I say, this is the kind of legwork you need to do in terms of kind of advanced marketing before your book comes out. So if you've got 2 or 3 online communities where you're established, then when the book comes out, they're more likely to cover your book. And that coverage just gets your book mentioned before, I don't know how many countless more readers than you might otherwise reach.
That's fantastic advice. I mean, I really I know you're busy, and I've really appreciated you taking your time and giving people lots of tips. I know as people, often I think as people get older, they feel, I've always wanted to write this book, and maybe now the time that they're spending on their career is, it's less demanding, or they've retired, or the children have left home, and people think, right, now is the time for me to write this book. So it's been great to have all this information from you. If they wanted to follow you on Twitter, for example.
At Debby Englander.
Okay, that's great. At Debby Englander. Yeah. So that's pretty straightforward. And I think you're happy if people wanted to email you as well. Is that okay?
And it's writereditor.d@gmail.com.
Okay, thank you very much. I really appreciate it. It's been great talking to you.
It's fun, and I love when authors are able to get their books out to the world. So happy to help.
Thank you very much indeed.
You're welcome.